Hello and welcome to Sunday Politics. Stormont's up and running, but what's the destination? Among the promises of good intentions and serving in the best interests of everyone is the harsh reality that we've seen and heard it all before. Still, it was a day of drama and comedy.
I am sorry for all the lives lost during the conflict, without exception.
She will do so as First Minister. Well done, Jeffrey.
He is a political failure, a dead-end unionist.
Will you both now in this chamber pledge to all the people of the North that for the duration of this mandate you will not use your power under the Northern Ireland Act to collapse devolution by resigning your office?
And we are privileged to have her, and I am delighted to support her for the position of Deputy Chief Constable.
We'll discuss the main talking points from all yesterday's developments at Stormont with our studio panel and ask how smoothly things are likely to run in future. The big public commitment to delivery for all, regardless of background or constitutional ambition. The pure theatre of intra-unionist fighting. The remaining potential for future collapse at the hands of Sinn Féin or the DUP. Plus, the twist in the ministerial picks and why it happened. Today, we're reflecting on the drama of a watershed day at Stormont with my panel, the Northern Ireland editor of the Belfast Telegraph and Sunday Independent Sam McBride, the political correspondent of the Irish News John Manley and Professor Deirdre Heenan from Ulster University. But first, to the stated aims of the new First and Deputy First Ministers. Michelle O'Neill first, who promised to address the collapse in public services, including a transformation in healthcare. But it was also this message which caught people's attention.
To all of you who are British and Unionist, your national identity, your cultures, your traditions are important to me. I will be both inclusive and respectful to you all. None of us are being asked to surrender who we are. Our allegiances are equally legitimate. But let's walk this two-way street together. Let's meet one another halfway. I will be doing so with an open hand and also with heart. Much suffering and trauma persists in our society as a result of the injustices and the tragedies of the past. We must never forget all those who have died or been injured or their families. I am sorry for all the lives lost during the conflict, without exception. As First Minister, I am wholeheartedly committed to continuing the work of reconciliation between all of our people. The past cannot be changed or cannot be undone, but what we can do, what we all can do, is build a better future.
Michelle O'Neill, and the voice in the background was Jim Allister's with the taunt of no alternative. The First Minister was followed by the Deputy First Minister, Emma Little-Pengelly, who, like her new partner in Stormont Castle, stated her constitutional position proudly, but agreed that it shouldn't act as a barrier to her serving everyone.
Across this chamber, we have different political viewpoints and experiences. But what we also know is that the wee mummy waiting on her cancer diagnosis is not defined as being Republican or Unionist. She is defined by the sleepless nights and worry that she may never see her children grow up. The daddy fighting to get the right educational support for his child is not defined by orange or green, but by the stress and anxiety for the future of the child they love. Let this be our inspiration, for those are the issues that we can agree on.
Emma Little-Pengelly, so are you convinced by what you've heard so far? Let's hear what my studio panel make of it all. Interesting stuff, interesting little flavour of exchanges in the chamber yesterday. Deirdre, they talked, both of them. The talk yesterday, you might say, but can they walk the walk?
Well, we shall see. I mean, yesterday was about the theatre, and the speeches are scripted clearly, and there was generosity in the speeches and a willingness to work together. But I suppose watching at home, we're thinking, how long is this going to last before we see what was described earlier as them taking lumps out of each other. I think they realise, though, that the public mood is that this has to work. And working doesn't mean fine speeches in the House, it means delivery. And we will judge them by their delivery. So I think they have had that message loud and clear.
Can they actually deliver? Because the bar is quite high. I mean, things have been pretty bad in terms of delivery over the last 2 years, but they need to actually make a difference now. Can they do that?
There are huge challenges. You know, that our public services have been degrading for a decade, but the problem is that they will always get distracted by other stuff. And you know, it's all right. The public, what they say publicly is one thing, but what happens privately again is another thing. But you know, carve-ups, we've seen that. You know, at council level, how the DUP and Sinn Féin often operate. So yes, while the sentiment is there, we'll judge them by their actions.
Sam, it's very interesting that during the ministerial picks, when D'Hondt was run, the DUP appeared to pull a move to try to wrong-foot Sinn Féin. What do you think was going on, and why would the DUP do that after what we heard from the new First and Deputy First Ministers?
Well, what seemed to happen is that, and from an optimist's perspective, this would be Stormont back to working the way that it sort of did work for a while. Backroom deals between the DUP and Sinn Féin, carving up power between them privately. Something seemed to go awry there. What it means is that Sinn Féin is left with finance. We've had 2 Sinn Féin finance ministers. Now we're on to our 3rd. None of them have brought a budget yet, so they're going to have to bring their first budget if this Stormont lasts. And it's going to be a very unpopular role. They're not going to have very much money to hand out. Lots of money at the start for public sector workers to get their pay rise. After that, cut after cut after cut, raising rates and ending the cap on rates. Lots of things that are potentially very unpopular with different constituencies. So that's difficult. But also, if Sinn Féin is serious about power in the south, this is the sort of thing they need to do and to handle well. So that's an opportunity for them.
John, what did you make of that apparent decision by the DUP not to run with what everybody expected, to not put Gordon Lyons into finance, but to, in fact, take education instead? And that obviously caused a problem for Sinn Féin, because that's not what they were expecting.
Yes,
and Kiva Archibald thought she was going to education. She's now in finance.
It's not even clear yet whether that decision was endorsed at leadership level within the DUP, and perhaps, you know, it's very possible Paul Givan took a unilateral decision. It may be related to the relationship and sex education guidelines that have been introduced by the Secretary of State, that they see that as an opportunity to conduct a culture war. It also puts grave pressure on the new minister, the new finance minister, because that really is where we need to see, you know, revenue raising and cuts could both prove unpopular, but that's where we need to see initiatives and dynamics going forward.
Hard to believe that was a solo run on the part of Paul Givan and the person nominating him. You'd imagine that the leadership of the party knew what it was doing, but maybe we'll find out in due course. I want to talk to you about health. There was a commitment there from the new First Minister that transformation within health would happen. We know that Robin Swan committed to it when he was Health Minister in the past during COVID. The situation has got worse, not better, in the intervening period. Can health be transformed now with Robin Swan back at the wheel?
Well, I think on a personal level, most people think that Robin Swan is a man of integrity and that he got a good report card during COVID. But it is important to say that COVID was a period of national consensus, a very different landscape than the one that he's going into today. And of course, there was goodwill towards him because we were afraid that we were all going to die, to be honest. But during that period, if you had a much more objective assessment of his role as Health Minister, you know, he put out a paper about waiting lists, which was actually nonsense, that said waiting lists could be almost resolved by March of this year. So in policy terms, he didn't really move the dial forward at all. And he was popular because he didn't say anything political. He was just acting as that goodwill person, getting us through a time of crisis. My real worry here is both the DUP and Sinn Féin said health is our #1 priority. We must fix health. Jeffrey Donaldson said he was coming back because he heard these dreadful stories, largely reported by Mary-Louise Connolly, about the crisis, the chaos in health. And of course, Mary Lou MacDonald was up talking about waiting lists and that being a priority. Having said that, they have passed the ball here to a forget about Robin Swan, to the UUP, a party that will have to fight to have their voice heard, a party that will not have the power to make the change. So I actually think it's a deeply cynical move. And Robin Swan has said he's going to Westminster. So is he using this as a platform? Because this can only be a short-term fix. So I am deeply disappointed that this has happened, and I feel we're playing political games through parties at the expense of people.
Well, when we get Robin Swan into the studio as Minister, we'll ask him those questions. Of course, Sam, do you think that the other parties can resist the temptation to play politics with health? And if they do that, then they can give the space to Robin Swan to actually make the decisions that need to be made to change things. Is that possible in the current climate?
It will be difficult at a local level. When Robin Swan comes to downgrade a service in a particular hospital, the MLAs in that area are more likely than not to be up in arms about it, to be out waving placards against that. So that's the litmus test of this. But I think Deirdre's right when she says that Robin Swan, yes, he was very, very good in what he did during the crisis, but he didn't get the scrutiny that normally you would get there. However, we can be too cynical about this. I think the Ulster Unionists deserve credit. They've taken a dreadfully difficult position, something that Reg MP once described as the ministry for closing hospitals, and that was 20 years ago before we were in this sort of crisis, and they've done it because they actually believe in it. Robin Swan is a decent man. He does believe in this. He didn't turn COVID into an orange and green issue. That's the best we can hope for here, but it might not be enough.
OK, John, briefly, if you would, can the other parties resist the temptation to play politics with health?
I probably have to answer no. The rhetoric will be there, public, but ultimately it'll come down to parish politics. But Robin Swan is obviously trusted, and there's no better figurehead, I imagine, in that regard. But it's really that will, as Sam says, that will be the test for the parties, whether they're genuine.
OK, we'll leave it there for now. Thank you all very much indeed. Let's move on to another talking point, the battle between the DUP and Jim Allister. The insults from each side over the last few days developed a real edge in the chamber yesterday. We'll discuss in a moment the potential consequences of this new version of Mr Allister versus the DUP. But first, here's a flavour of what went on.
Mr Speaker, now comes the consummation of the Donaldson deal with the DUP enthroning a Sinn Féin First Minister, with the unelected bridesmaid as deputy. David Trimble had his well done David moment of endorsement from IRA leader Gerry Adams. Now the leader of the DUP has his well done Jeffrey moment as he gives us a First Minister who wallows in glorification of terrorism and tells us there was no alternative to the murder of our kith and kin, no alternative to Amon, no alternative to Enniskillen, no alternative to T-Ban, no alternative to Kings Mills or to Market Hill, and no alternative to the incineration of a young woman, Yvonne Dunlop, in my constituency in Ballymena, whose vile murderer, McElwee, Miss O'Neill, celebrates every year. This year, she will do so as First Minister. Well done, Jeffrey.
By his own test, and we measure him against his test, for the election to this Assembly, he said it would be a failure if he returned on his own. And he's here on his own. So his test that he set, he failed because he is a political failure, a dead-end unionist. When we in the Democratic Unionist Party are on the front foot leading for unionism, and we will build the unionist community, not divide it like the member for North Antrim.
The opposing positions of Paul Givan and Jim Allister, and we'll discuss that along with the official opposition in the chamber itself in just a moment. We've no idea, of course, if the outworkings of the Windsor framework will cause problems at Stormont, or indeed if some unforeseen issue might suddenly bring things to a halt again. The new leader of the opposition, Matthew O'Toole, had this to say on the subject.
We needed to address ecological catastrophe in our greatest natural resource, to help exhausted parents with the crippling cost of childcare, to take economic advantage of our unique trading position, But to do any of this, we need to be here. Today's restoration comes after 2 years of chaos. In 2020, the restoration came after 3 years. First and Deputy First Minister, while I congratulated you both of your parties have collapsed these institutions in the last 7 years. If they are collapsed again, I don't think they'll ever restart. But only 2 people have the power to stop that happening. Both of you. So, my first act, leading the SDLP opposition in this reformed assembly, is to ask both of you to add to the pledge of office you have just taken. Will you both now in this chamber pledge to all the people of the North that for the duration of this mandate you will not use your power under the Northern Ireland Act to collapse devolution by resigning your office? I'm happy to give way to either the First or Deputy First Minister. I'll follow up in writing, Mr. Speaker. I'll give way to the First Minister.
With all due respect, I don't think this is a day for stunts, but let us all collectively work together to ensure that this is sustainable, that this is lasting, and that we do right for the people that we collectively serve. We choose to be in the Assembly and in the Executive because we want to make a difference. I am here, I have turned up, I think everybody has turned up today, and we should be grateful for that, but more than that, we should actually get down to the business of delivering.
I thank the First Minister honestly for her answer. I did ask that neither party chooses to collapse the institutions. People out there want to know that isn't going to happen again.
Well, let's take those 2 issues, intra-unionism and the question posed by Matthew O'Toole. Just on that subject, John, first of all, of a commitment from the 2 main parties not to collapse Stormont again. I mean, there was no commitment yesterday, but clearly they both said they don't want to see it happening again.
Yes, I think there's an appetite among the public not to see the institutions collapse, and therefore we need some kind of reform. But I imagine the 2 biggest parties will resist that. It could be, you could almost credit the opposition of the 2016 with bringing down the Arlene Foster's administration. So, but though without the Ulster Unionists supporting the SDLP in opposition, perhaps they won't be as effective.
We'll talk more about opposition in a moment or two, but I do want to ask you, Sam, about the relationship between the DUP and Jim Allister. Paul Given there calling Jim Allister a dead-end unionist and effectively saying he's a one-man band in the chamber. He was not missing and hitting the wall in those comments yesterday.
It was very personal, and I was up in the press gallery. I could see Jeffrey Donaldson, Gregory Campbell, Gavin Robinson sitting there watching it. For most of the time that Jim Allister was really giving both barrels to the DUP, Jeffrey Donaldson was grinning. He gave the appearance of really enjoying it. I don't think he was enjoying it. I think this is very awkward for him. It's one thing to say that Jim Allister is a dead-end unionist. They were standing with that dead-end unionist until this time last week, basically. And so therefore there is a very acute vulnerability. It's one thing to say that the Irish Sea border doesn't matter. That's a totally logical stance which many unionists take. But it's very difficult to say it did matter last week and suddenly this week because it's been softened. It's OK to go back in. OK,
you've written a lot about unionism. What is your take on this? Do you think this is a bit of a flash in the pan and that the DUP will see Jim Allister off? Or could he still be a factor? Could this issue still be a factor in the forthcoming general election, whether that's May or October?
I think this will be a factor. It will not be something that sees any TUV person elected to Parliament, of course. But we saw what David Vance did to Peter Robinson when that seat went to Alliance. They could cost the DUP seats, they could hurt them, they could also harry them into different positions. It's not just about winning, it's about how Jim Allister influences DUP policy. He's done that very successfully, he's very good at it. I think he's better at it than some in the DUP give him credit for.
OK, I want to ask you about the opposition strategy of the SDLP. Does it make sense? Are you glad to see it?
Oh, I think it makes sense. I would imagine that they are delighted that they weren't joined in opposition by the UUP or the Alliance. I mean, if you think about it and take a step back, actually the natural party of opposition are the Alliance, because they are saying this is this orange and green carve up and we don't want to be part of it. Well, naturally then you would be in opposition. But I think for the SDLP, this is a real opportunity for them to say, look, we can be constructive, we're critical friends. If they resort to carping at the sidelines, then people will very quickly turn off and think they have nothing positive to say day. So I think for them, it's how they play it. But Matthew O'Toole is an effective communicator. He will have ideas and he will want to get attention. And of course, in terms of the media, if something happens in terms of policy, one might naturally expect that you go to the opposition to get their view. So they have this space, they own this space, but they have got to shape it to show not that they're government in waiting, because of course that doesn't happen here, but that they are responsible politicians, not always looking for the negative, but pointing out the contradictions that exist in this power-sharing executive.
But, you know, of 90 MLAs sitting in the chamber, that SDLP opposition is very small.
Yes, well, and it went from 8 to 7 yesterday with the suspension of Justin McNulty. But they could maybe, because of that position and the privileges afforded to them as opposition, they could have a disproportionate voice, a much louder voice than one would expect from 7 MLAs. As Deirdre says, Matthew's a very competent communicator. So we'll see how things go. It's difficult to know how effective they will be.
It is important, though, because when you talk about Jim Allister's a one-man band, look how effective he has been as a one-man opposition. So I don't think the numbers are going to be the big issue. It's what do they have to say that has any resonance to the public in Northern Ireland.
And Matthew O'Toole, as everybody agrees, basically is hugely competent, has been inside Downing Street, has been in the Treasury, is the sort of person who's able to see the big picture here. I think this is a massive opportunity for the SDLP. They've been waiting for this, now they've got it.
And what about the way in which, Sam, the SDLP has handled the Justin McNulty issue? He left yesterday without permission to go to coach his team, Laois, in Wexford, which is, the other end of the island. Professor John Tong's tweet, I thought, summed it up yesterday. We've been talking about potential splits within the DUP and losing members in the chamber and so forth. It didn't happen. And he tweeted yesterday, so after a dramatic and historic day, the only party to lose an MLA is the SDLP.
Well, true. I mean, look, it's a farcical situation. It's one thing to be the manager of a GAA team in Northern Ireland somewhere, or not that far over the border. To be travelling that far on a sitting day, there's going to be lots of late sittings here. Big backlog of stuff to get through. I think the way the SDLP have handled it has been pretty impressive. They've been tough with them. They've said, look, this is unacceptable. They haven't taken any nonsense, but they are going to lose him. But if you're serious about politics, you have to accept that. You can't let him decide that you can ride these two horses at once. You're either a legislator, and that's your primary focus, or you're heading off to coach a team.
Yeah, just worth making the point. I think you made a reference earlier that Sinn Féin didn't deliver a budget. Conor Murphy did technically deliver a budget in 2021, 2022.
Apologies if I forgot that.
No, I mean, of course, the issue of long-term planning is an issue that is unresolved. But Justin McNulty, how big an issue is that? How big a catastrophe was that?
Well, it has overshadowed the launch of opposition. I think Justin's behaviour has been very disappointing. The SDLP, I think, has acted appropriately, but now we may see a standoff in the coming months where Justin refuses to stand down. There is a very competent potential replacement in Pete Byrne waiting in Newry and Armagh. It depends on whether Justin will do the decent thing, and I would expect him to do that. He's always been something of an ideological outlier, I think, within the SDLP.
20 seconds.
It's about party credibility. You cannot say, we do not accept this, you cannot double job and then resile from that position. They've got to follow this through and show that they are a party that means business in terms of policies and a coherent unit. So they have got to follow this through and do what they said they would do if he wouldn't give up the position, because it is not tenable.
Do you think he will?
No.
You think he won't? Right, well, Your Honour, thank you for being so clear about that. We will find out in due course, because it's something that people are going to keep a very close eye on. We'll talk to you again a little bit later in the programme. But it does feel like the right moment for another of our contributions in our State We're In series. The politicians are full of talk about delivery for the people who need it most. Here's Jacinta Linden from the Bolster charity in Newry talking about what she wants to see happening next.
My name is Jacinta Linden and I'm founder of Bolster Community, a charity and social enterprise service in the Southern Trust area. I'm based in Newry and Kilkeel. Primarily our services are family support, older people and disability. last year we supported just under 9,000 people. The majority of those people were first-time users of our service. People who never would have thought that they'd need the help of a charity were now using Facebook requests and telephone calls to discreetly ask for help. You don't need me to highlight to you just how critical things are for people. An everyday occurrence, such as a car breaking down or a washing machine breaking, can tip a family from everyday normality into crises. Our public health colleagues in social work, in mental health, in disability, in nursing are crippled trying to meet the demand for services. As waiting lists get higher and higher, people are still going into crises, and often it's charities that are at the cutting edge of providing that help. So another service that's very much in demand is our home to hospital service, where we take mostly single dwelling seniors to out of area hospital appointments for chemotherapy and radiotherapy. Now, in normal times, families usually manage to support their loved ones, but in extraordinary times like this, another day off work, another fill of petrol in the car puts added pressure on families that are already at a tipping point. People are trying so hard just to get by each day and each week. So we need the start-stop politics to stop and the panto to end. We need people making decisions so we can get funding out to people where it's actually needed.
Jacinta Linden from Bolster in Uri. Let's just bring you our final thoughts from my guests of the day here in the studio. I need to, I suppose, turn to you, Deirdre, as our soothsayer in residence. You've just called Justin McNulty. You also called Emma Little-Pengelly for Deputy First Minister way before anybody else, and we laughed at you.
You did laugh, and here we are. And let me say, I wish both women well, but I do have a serious problem with Emma Little-Pengelly taking up the role as Deputy First Minister, because I think it undermines the democratic legitimacy of the process. I mean, this woman has not attracted a single vote and has been parachuted into arguably the co-equal, most important role in our local government. I mean, what does it say about our process? And for those people who say, oh, I don't raise an eyebrow about it, it's OK, the system allows it. The system allows a lot of things. But I think if Michelle O'Neill had turned up yesterday in Stormont with Jerry Adams and said, actually, at the last moment, we've decided to co-op him, would everybody say, oh, nothing to see here, not a problem? The whole place would have closed down. So I think we have to be honest that this is utterly unacceptable.
OK, John, here's the question. DUP and Sinn Féin say they want to work together to deliver for everybody, but they maintain the right to have their constitutional tennis game side by side. Is that workable?
I think it is, but as I say, it can often be a distraction. You know, they sweat the small stuff. The rhetoric's there, the aspirations are there, but we need solutions.
Can those two things continue side by side? Because one is informed by the other, and the ping-pong, if you like, of the constitutional debate gets quite nasty quite quickly.
Well, they will continue because that's the reality of the land in which we live. However, I think there was in what was a very good speech from the First Minister yesterday, there were a couple of allusions to some of the problems here. She talked about the need of cleaning up Lough Neagh. She was the minister, as Agriculture Minister, who was responsible for Going for Growth, the thing which turbocharged Lough Neagh's pollution. Lots of this lies just beneath the surface. It sounded good yesterday, it is good, but there's a lot of problems there. OK, one last prediction. I want literally a yes or no. Is Jeffrey Donaldson heading to the red benches of the Lords?
Absolutely. He is not coming back to Stormont. In fact, I don't think he'll stand for the seat in Lagan Valley. And
when do you think that might happen? Do you think he'll go sooner rather than later?
Well, I think a few months' time he'll be gone. OK, we will see. Thank you. On the record again, Mystic Meg it is. Yes, that's all we've got time for today. I'll be back with more on The View on Thursday night at 10:40 on BBC One. Keep a lookout for a special Red Lines from Stormont on BBC Sounds on Tuesday. In the meantime, from everyone in the team, thanks for watching. Have a good day. Bye-bye.